The different brand, I forgot. We're here.
We're getting the tweets.
So we are here. This is a Dynasty evaluation. I just unexpectedly pressed live without introducing him, but here we go. Colin McTamany.
A cold open, if you will.
A bold open, yes. I changed screens. JT, Colin McTamany, joining the show today. Some league mates here, some good friends, some good peeps. So today we're going to talk about running backs, what happened at the combine, the takeaways we got, who improved their stock, who dropped their stock, all the good stuff. I invited some pretty smart people here today to help me out with this stuff. So Colin, where can everybody find you at on the X?
Well, I appreciate you calling me smart. I don't get that a lot, but it's great to hear from you. I'm at Fantrax, as you can see by the sweatshirt here. I write fantasy football content for Fantrax. That includes written content as well as weekly, as of right now, off-season videos. I've been interviewing people every Friday. Fantrax Football Fridays on our social media platforms. That's Twitter and YouTube for the most part. Ready to dive into this discussion today. I feel like there's a lot that's about to go down in the NFL this week, next week, and in the coming months. So feels a little bit like the calm before the storm. Combine was great to see, but yeah, there's going to be plenty of more content coming out on Fantrax from myself and a lot of other guys.
Winter is coming, as they say. It's Jamie Parag. Good afternoon, guys. Thanks for joining us. JT, where can they find you at? Because I think all three of us do some stuff on Fantrax, huh?
Yep. Jump on the show with Fantrax with you. I also do IDP content for Fantrax as well during the season. You can check out my show, The Stew with JT Brew. Do a little bit of everything, sports gambling, hockey, C2C, Debbie, all the good stuff. So you can check me out on there too. And if you're into IDP, check out DLF. I'm over there. I write content for them. I'm going to have a couple rookie profiles coming out here soon, as well as my IDP rankings. I also have my IDP rookie rankings are now up on DLF. So go ahead and check that out.
A lot of names being wrong, but we are in Fantasy and Frames today. We are talking running backs. What happened at the combine? What happened? Who, JT, you weren't there for media days, that kind of stuff. But who do you think, when the running backs were walking around, you saw all the stuff, who do you think handled themselves best at the media throughout the day, throughout the weekend?
I thought everybody's pretty good. Like I said, I was there for mostly the on-field stuff as opposed to the interviews. So I just saw some snippets. Obviously everybody was all over the QBs. That was the big ones. Everybody's kind of like talking to those guys. I feel like everybody kind of was like, running backs, whatever. Give them the ball, let them run into people. So I don't think people ask as many crazy questions to running backs as the quarterbacks get. I feel like nobody really stood out to me, but I didn't see anything really crazy good or anything really crazy bad. So I felt like the running back crew was a solid crew. I think with no clear-cut number one this year, I think it's just been a lot different combine because you don't have, the Bijan Robinson. Everybody's like, he's the 1-1, he's the man. So I think it was nice to see almost everybody take part in the drills, be there for the whole week because everybody was trying to raise their draft profile. So that was kind of cool to see, as it wasn't that same way in every position, but I felt like running back, it felt like it was wide open and guys came and brought their all.
We get a lot of Audrey Gaspé still running a 40. He should finish today. Get out of here. This happens every year, man. Somebody's not running the big joke. It's funny. It's all good fun, tongue-in-cheek stuff, but I get it. There is a Braylon Allen's the running back one in this class, so I don't, you guys can say whatever you want to, but I get it. Colin, what did you think? Who handled themselves the best with the media this weekend?
I gotta echo JT a little bit. I wasn't at the combine, but I'm one of those degenerate nerds that watches every ounce of the combine just because it's football. It's maybe not in-game action, but it's if you're going to be a good fantasy football manager, especially Dynasty, you have to pay attention to all this stuff. Every little bit of content is a piece to the puzzle to winning a championship, and that means paying attention to the combine. Maybe you can't watch every minute like some of us, but you got to pay attention to who did well, who maybe didn't do so well. As far as the media went, I didn't think anyone stood out as far as the running backs go, but I will, drop a little bit of a hint here. You got to go watch Ray Davis from Kentucky talk about his story. I thought his media moment was very inspiring. He's, I think, going to be 25 in November. So he's been in college for a while, but me explaining his story is going to take a while. It's not going to do it justice, but long story short, he went from foster care at such a young age to now hopefully being drafted into the NFL. He's going to get a shot. So he's a guy that I think everyone should go listen to his story at least.
Yeah, good stuff. Who ran the fastest 40?
The fastest 40 was Isaac Guerendo, who, if you don't know him, now you know him because he really jumped out. 4.33 40-yard dash. A lot of the guys didn't run the 40 that I wanted to see. Obviously, Jonathan Brooks from Texas, he's still recovering from a torn ACL. Braylon Allen, who you mentioned is your RB1, he didn't run the 40. And Frank Gore Jr. was another guy I kind of wanted to see run the 40 selfishly, but he's already said he's going to run it at his pro day. But Isaac Guerendo is the guy that really, really stood out to everyone, running a 4.33. Mind you, the record now is 4.21 by Xavier Worthy of Texas. So Isaac Guerendo at the running back position, 4.33, definitely noticeable.
Jamie Perrog, again, what's your thoughts on Guerendo? Well, my thoughts are there's a blank line where the information is on most of the other running backs on my Google Sheets because I don't have any thoughts on them yet. I get a nice. It was a nice surprise to have somebody to just jump into the mix, give you some more homework to do, some more tape to watch, some more stuff like that. JT, what do you know about this guy? Because you're a little more deep in the weeds than we are.
Yeah, he didn't play a lot at Louisville. I mean, the guy was a workout wonder. He was behind a few other guys. That's kind of been a weird running back room there for the last couple of years. Guys kind of transferring in, transferring out. It's going to be interesting to see who likes him and where. He ran the 4.43, which is 4.33, which is great. But he kind of reminds me a little maybe of he's a bigger guy, but like Dre Archer, who the Steelers loved when he ran a crazy fast 40 a couple years ago. Can he find a spot on special teams? Can he maybe kick return for you? Can he get a spot on the offense? That's going to be the question for him, as he just didn't see a lot of playing time in college. So I think he's going to be some mystery. I think somebody obviously, whenever you test as well as he did, somebody's going to take a chance on you, thinking that they've got the next Willie Parker on their hands, as I keep making Steelers references. But he's a guy that didn't play a lot in college, but that got to the pros and actually had a very nice pro career, won a Super Bowl. Could he end up being one of those guys? He definitely could be. So somebody's going to take a chance on him. His question is where and what kind of opportunity is that going to end up being for him. But I'm excited to talk about these running backs. He's one of the few guys I haven't watched a ton just because he didn't play a lot in college. But I really like this running back crew, even if it's not as top heavy as people would like it to be. I think there's a lot of guys worth taking a chance on in this draft.
Yeah, just because you run a fast 40 or you run a straight line with your underwear on, that doesn't mean that you're a good football player. So there's a lot. We'll watch some tape. We'll see what happens. You'll see where's draft capital's at. Just because the guys in the NFL, they know this stuff. They already know who. Even though it was a name that just popped into our living rooms last couple weeks. Everybody in the NFL knows who this guy was 2 years ago. That kind of stuff. This is not a surprise to them. Maybe the surprise time in the 40 was a surprise to them, but they know who he is. They've heard of him before. And we'll find out in draft capital how good of a football player he is at the NFL draft. So that we'll see. Who ran his slowest 40?
Well, I want to mention here real quick with Isaac Guerendo and to JT's point, just a couple numbers here. He only had 99 carries in 23 games in 4 years at Wisconsin. So that's what JT's talking about, where we haven't seen a ton. Last year at Louisville, 132 carries, 810 yards, 11 rushing touchdowns, and then 22 receptions for 234 receiving yards. So still a lot of meat on the bone for a guy like Isaac Guerendo. Not a ton of wear and tear, but his career high in college is just 132 carries. So, while he does run a very fast 40-yard dash, I don't think this is the complete back that a lot of teams are looking to add, especially with like a day 2 pick. So even though he ran a fast 40, he'll probably go day 3. As far as the other guys that ran the 40-yard dash, right behind him was Jalen Wright, 4.38, Trey Benson, 4.39. 13 running backs ran a 4.4 or a 4.5. And then, yes, I know Jamie Prague in our comments already alluded to it. The slowest 40-yard dash was Audric Estime, Notre Dame, 4.71. Hey, he's 5'11", 227 pounds. I didn't expect him to be lightning fast, but 4.71 does stand out just because it is the slowest. Now, I will say about Estime, though, 6.17 yards per carry in his last 2 seasons, 156 carries for 920 yards 2 years ago, and then last season, 210 carries, 1,341 yards, 18 touchdowns with a 6.4 yards per carry average. So while he may not be the fastest running back at the combine, this is still a guy that NFL teams are going to be looking to add. we'll allude to maybe the landing spot later. But this is a guy that's going to be hard to bring down, even though he's not going to be breaking away too many long runs.
Jerry Bagshaw, thanks for joining us. Hello, all. Yeah, we are in the game of football is won in 4-yard increments. If you can get 4 yards per play, you're going to get a first down every set of downs. So we're not looking for a guy who can run a 4.3 40 and get a 90-yard breakaway touchdown every play. We're looking for someone that can catch the ball, that can block, that can get the ball between the tackles and get you 4 yards per play. And if anything after that is a bonus, so we're this Audric Estime, I would take a chance on him 1,000 out of 1,000 times before we start talking about other guys, like our Isaac Garendo. So we'll do that.
John, I was going to say on the list, there's a lot of guys in here who ran in the 4.5s, which isn't awful for a running back. There's plenty of guys in the league that have really good careers that ran in the 4.5s. Just being able to find the hole, the vision, the fast 40 time isn't everything. A guy that was in that mix was Jawar Jordan, 4.56. He was technically the starter at Louisville in front of Grendo. So he ran a 4.56. And he was the starter guy. A guy I was a little surprised at the slow time was Bucky Irvin with a 4.55. I actually thought he was going to be a lot faster than that. I thought he would be in the 4.4s, maybe 4.49. So he was a little surprised there at the 4.55. I think Blake Corum being 4.53 was about where people kind of thought he would be for the type of running back he is. So running the 4.5s, Ray Davis, somebody that Colin brought up, 4.52. But I think those guys have that type of body type. They're all a little bit shorter. Their guys a little bit bigger. So I thought those the fact that they were in those 4.5s was really good. I think if SMA would have been like higher 4.5s, I think people might have they would have ignored it a little more. I think the fact that he ran the 4.7 is what got people on his radar. The one that I was a little surprised about and a little disappointed was Cody Schrader from Missouri. I like him a ton, led the SEC in rushing. Absolute great story. Again, a guy who was a D2 guy that took it upon himself to walk on at Missouri and give himself a shot, ends up starting and leading the SEC in rushing. He ran a 4.61. I was hoping he would be more in like the more 4.5 range, 4.55. 4.61 was a little disappointing for him, but I still think he's a solid player who's very similar to those other guys as far as running style.
What's funny too is that, if you don't sit down every Sunday and watch every NFL game, a lot of people just skim the box scores and look at the numbers. Oh, he had 9 catches, 134 yards, whatever. One of those catches might have gone for 80 yards. But when you're just looking at the box score, you go, oh, what a great day for this guy, even though most of it was on one play. You got to watch these guys run the 40s. You look at the time. Audric Estime actually looked really good, but it resulted in a 4.7. Whereas I watched a guy like Blake Corum, and this is nothing against Blake Corum, but he ran in the 4.5s, but he looked like he was working for that 4.5. Like it didn't come naturally to him. So you do have to watch those back a little bit and just see how these guys ran. Maybe some of them stumbled and that led to their scores. So it is important to do that. But Audric Estime did get out quickly and had a really good stride once he went on there. But I do think maybe at his pro day, if he runs again, he could maybe run in the 4.5. So it's something we still got to see from him.
Yeah. Wendy Early was also at the draft. She's
Colin. She had some great content. Awesome content from Wendy. You had to sit down with Stefania Bell. Everyone, if you haven't seen that, go check out Wendy Early's interview with Stefania Bell, who does a lot of injury analysis. It was awesome.
Yeah, she's awesome. Thanks for joining us, Wendy, as usual. Thanks for being awesome in the women of fantasy football space. Thanks for being awesome in the fantasy football space itself. Thanks for just being a good person, too. Wendy's one of my favorite people in this whole Twitterverse here, Xverse. So who didn't run at all by choice? Like who just, who showed up and didn't do a lot of the testing, kind of so we were kind of expected or were hoping to run?
Your RB1, Braylon Allen, didn't run. I don't think it's a huge knock against him. What was really fun to see out of Braylon Allen, or just interesting for me, was that a lot of people expected him to weigh in the 240s. He weighed in, I think, at 235. So that was nice to see. He's dropped a couple pounds there. I think that's a big concern. Is he just this like lumbering back? Braylon Allen, that is. He did just turn 20 in January. So very interesting prospect here, Braylon Allen. I don't know if he'll be the first guy off the board, but didn't run the 40. Said he's going to run it at Wisconsin's Pro Day. I do expect him to run in the 4.5s. Anything slower than that would be concerning. But since he did drop about 10 pounds, if he stays at that weight and runs in the 4.5s, dare I say the 4.4s, he could be the top running back off the board just because he looks like one of the most complete backs. 26 bench reps. He's 6'1", 235, as already mentioned, younger guy. So maybe teams will be more interested in using high draft capital on him.
Yeah, he absorbs the ball pretty well on the backfield. If you watch his tape, you watch any of his games, just, he watches the ball the whole way and absorbs it, tucks it away, and it's all business going downfield from there. So big fan of Braylon Allen. I don't have to be like, this guy's going to be 10 times better than the next guy. They're all good football players. This is a very good, a quality draft class. I'll put it at that anyway. So we'll leave it at there. But a couple of guys had some injuries. Tell me, are these injuries a concern for these guys coming in the draft right now? JT, who was injured? Who didn't participate? Who could have participated and injured? Who's going to be ready for the NFL season? That kind of stuff.
Yeah, Allen not running was the one thing. Gore not running was the other thing. I think most of the guys did. Obviously, Jonathan Brooks is going to be the one that's way up there because, coming back from the ACL injury, didn't get to participate at all. A lot of people have him as a possible number one back in this one. Some of these guys that, have had some injuries over the years. Some guys not. I think, the guy for me is number one, if I'm just going to throw it out there, is Trey Benson. He's been my RB1 since last summer. I still have him as my RB1. I was really interested to see what his RAS score would be and kind of his times. Him running the 4.39 knocked it out for me. When he ran the 4.39, the 40, I thought he would be fast. I didn't think he'd be that fast. As a guy at 6'1", 215, 216, that's phenomenal. His RAS score was up at 9.77. To me, I like him out of the backfield. I like everything he does. I think he catches the ball well. He doesn't fumble. To me, he's my number one, and he really just solidified it for me. A lot of these other guys are kind of where I thought they would be for the guys that performed. I really like that middle group of guys, kind of talking about Frank Gore, Cody Schrader, Ray Davis, Blake Corum. I feel like there's a big group of guys that are all kind of jumbled together right now. I'm not sure if guys either elevated themselves or went down people's boards because of what they did. I didn't think anybody really, outside of the SMA run really hurt themselves with the performance. But yeah, it's tough when you don't get to see guys. But the nice thing was most guys did participate because the draft is so everybody's kind of stacked together right now. So that was the nice thing. Most everyone ran everything. I thought Jalen Wright really helped himself. He was a guy that people were excited to run fast. He did run fast. He had a 9.81 RAS score. So that was number 3 overall behind Garendo, who had the 9.98, and then Tyrone Tracy, who had a 9.87. Another guy in college who didn't play a ton, but had a great score. So I think Wright moved up the boards. And I'll talk about just one more guy that, for me, I thought I was interested because I wasn't sure what I thought about him, and that was Marshawn Lloyd from USC. I kind of seen some tape. I'm like, oh, he had a good yards per carry. The offense was pretty good. The defense bad. Like, when I watched him run, he ran smoothly. He looked good in the drills. He's a guy that definitely, for me, I'm going to go back and relook at my ranking for him. He might jump up a couple spots for me in my ranking. I probably had him somewhere between RB6 and RB10. He might sneak in the top 5 for me. I really liked what I saw to him at the Combine.
I got the Trey Benson text as soon as he ran from JT in Indy. He was so excited, so he couldn't. Colin, how about you? What do you think? As far as these guys who were injured and stuff like that, like, who do you expect to be like one of the best running back coming out this year?
Yeah, I think the guy that we got to emphasize here is Jonathan Brooks, obviously from Texas. Tore his ACL in November, so the recency bias for Jonathan Brooks just isn't there for a lot of people that do invest so heavily in the Combine, but he could still be the number 1 running back taken in this NFL draft. 187 carries last year for 1,139 yards, 10 touchdowns in just 11 games before tearing his ACL. Why we don't know enough about Jonathan Brooks? If you remember, there was a guy named Bijan Robinson ahead of him last year on Texas's roster, as well as Roschon Johnson. So this guy was kind of buried on that roster for years. He finally gets a shot this year to be the lead back and just dominated until, succumbing to that injury. So he's a guy that I really want to pay attention to when this draft comes around. Does the NFL agree that he is the top back? Will he be the top back taken? Will he be in the top 3 of backs taken, maybe on day 2 and round 3 or so? So he's a guy I really want to see, even though we didn't get to see him run the 40, do any of these drills. I do think he is one of the more complete backs in this draft, if you watch the tape and such. So Jonathan Brooks is a guy that, as far as injuries go, is probably the number 1 guy people should be talking about. When you look at a guy like Breece Hall, and I'm not comparing Jonathan Brooks to Breece Hall per se, but Breece Hall 2 years ago as a rookie came into the NFL with 800 exactly carries from his time in college, goes to the Jets, lead back, tears his ACL, comes back last year, a little bit of a slow start. Now he's being discussed as arguably the RB1 in Dynasty. So I don't think ACL tears are that scary anymore. But when you combine Jonathan Brooks's ACL tear with perhaps limited work in college, really just having this 187 carry season, and that's it to show for, I do think people are going to be a little bit lower on him. I do think in dynasty drafts, if you were drafting today per se, before the NFL draft, I don't know many people that are, but if you took Jonathan Brooks with a second round pick, I do think you're getting a steal. Depending on where he goes in the NFL draft, he could elevate to the first round. I'm sure we'll talk about how a first round mock looks at the end of this conversation, but Jonathan Brooks is arguably in my top 3. I do think it's interesting. We've gone through this. John, I just want to confirm your RB1 in this class right now is who?
Travion Allen.
Braylon Allen?
Braylon Allen.
Okay.
Yeah,
I thought I heard JT say your RB1 is who?
Trey Benson.
Okay. Mine is personally at this point a split between Jonathan Brooks and Marshawn Lloyd, who JT just mentioned. I do think all 5 of those backs are grouped into like a 1A, 1B, we got to see where they end up because landing spot is huge. Last year, I was really, really into Zach Charbonnet out of UCLA. Then he went to the Seattle Seahawks, and I was like, hey, he's not going to get any opportunities there. And I was also into Roshan Johnson. He went to the Bears where Justin Fields was the lead rusher. So landing spot is huge for a lot of these guys, depending on where they go. I did an article on Fantrax. I'm sorry, I did a video on Fantrax last week, the most RB needy teams. You can check that out. Some of the landing spots include Miami, Baltimore, even the Cleveland Browns if they get rid of Nick Chubb. So I do think if some of these teams add some of these running backs, especially with high draft capital, our rankings are going to completely change. How Braylon Allen runs the 40 may impact my thoughts there. But I think the general discussion we have with these running backs is that we went into the combine all having a different ranking of maybe our top 5, definitely our RB1s. And we left the combine with perhaps different rankings, but still different amongst each other as well. There's really no clear-cut number 1 guy in this class. It would have been Travion Henderson out of Ohio State. He's returning for another season there, but I do think landing spot is going to be huge for a lot of these guys, especially to bring it full circle, Jonathan Brooks, who's returning from an ACL.
Yeah, who benefited the most by going to the combine? Like, who showed up there and just said, yes, this is great. They didn't need to be there, but they showed up and they improved their draft stock by immensely.
I actually think it is Trey Benson. I think a lot of people, were talking about Florida State this year. They got snubbed from the playoffs. Trey Benson is a guy, that it ran a 4.39 at the combine. I think a lot of people, JT included, was happy to see that. Top 3 at the 40 at 6 foot at 216 pounds. That is incredible. That screams to me that he can be a 3-down back, which you don't see a lot anymore in the NFL. Only 20 carries in 1 game throughout his college career. So that's a little concerning, but you also don't see that a lot in the NFL either. He's a guy at 6 foot, 216 pounds with 4.39 speed that I think can do that though. 154 and 156 carries respectively in his last 2 seasons. Each season he had 900 plus rushing yards. So this is a guy that I think could do it all. And I think when you saw him at the combine, go through the drills, run that 40, and you look at his RAS score, he proved that. So I think he benefited the most.
Who benefited the most by coming out now, and who benefited the most by staying in school for an extra year and now coming out and now being a 4th year or even more running back, JT?
Well, like Colin said, Travion Henderson would have probably been the 1-1 for most people as far as RB1, not 1-1 overall. RB1, I think he's still going to have that shot as long as he can try to stay healthy at Ohio State. Injury concerns with him is the biggest knock against him, as he had a great breakout freshman year and then was pretty banged up all of his sophomore year. So he's one of those guys. Quinshot Judkins, this guy's going to be interested to see what happens with him. He was at Ole Miss. He decided to go to Ohio State. So now those guys are splitting the backfield. A lot of people had them as their top guys. And a guy I think is going to be really interesting is Rocket Sanders. Was at Arkansas, was way up on a lot of people's lists, and then he was hurt all year last year. He basically had a handful of carries, never could put it together, ended up transferring to South Carolina. He ended up putting on a lot of weight, where he was like pushing 245 at one point that I heard. So if he can get back down in size and he can have a really good year for South Carolina, he's the guy I really, really liked. I think maybe the extra weight is just from him being with the injury and not working out all the time. But if he can have a bounce back year, as it sits right now, those are probably 3 of the top 5 guys for me. Obviously, both the running backs at Penn State will be big ones. Singletary, Allen, those guys will be in the mix there as well, coming out next year. Some of those guys probably could have came out this year and they would have been in the same mix with some of these other guys. But there's a chance for those guys to kind of really put their stamp on this next season and really move up the draft boards next year.
Yeah, Matt, by going to the combine, I know some people ran slower 40s. Some people didn't do their RAS score wasn't as good or didn't show up as well. But Colin, like who do you think like hurt themselves the most, like across the board? Not just with their 40 times, not just with the RAS scores, not just with the interviews or anything. Who hurt themselves the most, do you think, the entire weekend?
I don't think anyone really hurt themselves because I do think, we're looking at it a little bit from a fantasy football perspective, who's going to emerge as the RB1, who's the clear cut. And I don't think we have a clear answer to that. I think we have narrowed it down, but we still need to see how the NFL draft goes. I don't think we got a ton of answers from the combine. I don't think anyone really went there and looked awful. You can argue that Audric Estime, his 4.740 is concerning, but he had a better RAS score than Blake Corum. Slightly better, but better nonetheless. Bucky Irving had a horrible RAS score. I don't think Bucky Irving is going to fail in the NFL, but when we're looking at RAS score, that's relative athletic score. It takes your measurables, your performance, comparative to the position you play. Some guys that had some really good RAS scores would be in the 9s. That would be, had the list here.
Yeah, you had Jalen Wright at a 9.81,
Yeah.
Trey Benson 9.77, Marshawn Lloyd 9.29, Dylan Lobb 9.21, and then Garendo.
And this is out of 10. This is out of 10.
Yep,
so
this is out of 10. Those were all the guys in the 9s, and there was about 4 or 5 guys in the 8s and the mid to high 8s as well.
Right. And, I was looking at an article actually, I feel like the RAS score has come into play a little bit more recently than years before. But there are some people that looked at RAS scores, again, that relative athletic score from years past. The Kansas City Chiefs drafted a guy, Brian Johnston, who had a 10 out of 10 RAS score in 2008. He played 9 games for the Chiefs and then was waived. You look at Tom Brady. I don't know if you guys have heard of him, but Tom Brady was a quarterback for the Patriots for a couple years. And then he went to Tampa Bay, won a couple Super Bowls. He had a RAS score of 1.49 out of 10. So the RAS score isn't the end-all, be-all, but it definitely stands out for some guys. Isaac Garendo, 9.98 out of 10. Is Isaac Garendo the RB1 in this class? Probably not, but that definitely stands out. So when you say people maybe hurt themselves at the combine, I don't think that's necessarily true, but maybe they fell short or going to fall down the list a little bit behind guys like Isaac Garendo, who definitely helped himself by going to the combine, standing out. Bucky Irving is the guy I want to talk about, though. 3.72 RAS score. Again, JT, I think, had mentioned this, didn't really run the fastest 40. Coming out of Oregon, he was a guy that I definitely liked. I wanted to see, but never, he improved every season at Oregon, 133 rush attempts, 156, 186. So never really had that 200 carry season, not that type of back. But 4 rushing touchdowns, 5, and then 11, 6.2 yards per carry average. I don't think he's going to be a guy that steps onto a team and is the lead back, but he could be a nice complement piece. Last year we saw Jahmyr Gibbs drafted 12th overall to the Lions, who had just signed David Montgomery. When David Montgomery signed in free agency, we all thought, oh my God, they lost Jamal Williams, they lost DeAndre Swift, or they're about to lose DeAndre Swift. He got traded in April. David Montgomery is going to be the bell cow for this team. And yes, he had a great season behind that offensive line, but then they added Jahmyr Gibbs. So Bucky Irving could get added to a backfield situation like that, still have success alongside another running back who's doing just as well. So again, to bring back to your question, I don't think anyone really hurt themselves, but definitely had some guys stand out amongst the rest at the combine.
I think JT had mentioned him before, but I think the feel-good story of the entire draft was Cody Schrader, and I think that he, if anybody kind of gave themselves like any kind of like slipping in value kind of thing. I think Schrader, man, he didn't do very well. So
did he get hurt? Didn't he pull something?
Yeah, I think he did. And I tell you what, the Cody Schrader, for everybody watching him, you knew that the RAS score was something he probably wasn't going to get a great one, just because this is not his game. He's not an overly athletic guy. It's partly why he went to a D2 school. He's this guy that knows football, runs hard. I think he can make a roster. I just think he could be a decent back. Is he ever going to be a star in the NFL? Probably not. But I think he could be one of those guys that could be playable and especially in fantasy if he gets on a team and gets an opportunity. Ray Davis, to me, along with Cody Schrader, both those guys, you knew they weren't going to be over the top athletic. You knew they weren't going to blow you away. You just wanted them to not be bad. And I thought both of them were okay. And I think Ray Davis, again, I think he's got good hands. He doesn't have blazing speed, but he's got good size. He runs hard. He catches the ball. He's another one of those guys. Could he be a David Montgomery in the NFL? I think he could be. Now, you're going to get some teams scared off because he is 25, but we're just in that day and age right now with the COVID years that guys are older coming into the draft. But again, maybe like a Tajay Spears, somebody that takes him say, hey, we just want 3 good years out of him, 4 good years out of him, and if we don't sign to a second contract, then we don't. But he's a guy, just because he's a little older, for me, it might drop him just a little bit in his draft stock, but he's a guy I got my eye on. I like him a lot. I just think he's an all-around, just a baller. Like Cody Schrader, I just think those guys just go out and they run hard and they're tough-nosed players. If they get an opportunity for the right team, they can work out. And I think they're right there with that. Blake Corum's, Andre Estimes. Those guys are just never going to blow you away athletically, but know how to play the running back position.
Yeah, Ray Davis, a little bit older version of like Michael Carter kind of thing for me. A guy I'm rooting for a lot, but it is what it is.
Yeah, I think Ray Davis, when you consider he's turning 25 in November, so his rookie season will be 25. He'll turn 26 his second year, 27, then 28. So after his 4-year rookie deal, he'll be 28 heading into free agency. Ray Davis isn't a guy, and unless he really dominates at the next level, that is going to get that second contract. So when you think about teams using him, they're going to use him probably right away, if at all. He might not even get drafted. We really don't know. He could be a 6th, 7th round pick. He does have 193 rush attempts at 3 different schools. That's Temple, Vanderbilt, and Kentucky. He does have 936 rushing yards or more at each school as well. And last season, he had 1,100 rushing yards and 323 receiving yards with 21 total touchdowns. So he's a guy that I do think can actually come in and play right away. But again, a lot of tread on the tires. Not going to get that second contract out of him, but that might benefit an NFL team to, deploy him right away. But again, it's going to be tough. A lot of these older guys, which back to John, saying Braylon Allen's your RB1, him being 20 years old is going to play to his advantage a little bit. If teams use maybe a 3rd, 4th round pick on him, and then give him that second contract for cheap, he's going to have a nice long career in the NFL if his health holds up. So when you're making these dynasty fantasy football picks, if Ray Davis gets taken a little bit earlier than other backs, or if at all or so, just know that you're only getting a couple years out of him, where a guy like Braylon Allen you're going to have for a long time, maybe not for the same team, but for an extended period of time.
That being said, now fantasy football is what we talk about a lot, but the NFL draft is a real thing. It's a lot of times that's what we gauge talent, is where people get drafted, especially for running backs. Who do you think gets drafted first in the NFL draft? JT, we'll start with you. Which of these running backs, they all have their own skills, they all have their own specialties, they all have their own sizes, they all have their own, backgrounds. Who's the first running back to get to actually drafted in the NFL draft this year?
To me, this was a slightly hard question, because I think what you're going to see is each guy is going to be a different, kind of like each one of us have a different RB1. I think you're going to see in the teams in the league that like certain guys over another guy just because they feel like he fits their system a little bit better. And so where does that guy go? To me, I don't know if anybody sneaks in the first round. I feel like you're going to get some really nice second round value out of like a Braylon Allen. I think Benson did enough to maybe work his way into the second round. I think Jonathan Brooks is going to be a guy that guys are considering, because Jonathan Brooks was a redshirt sophomore, so he's a younger guy as well. So I think those guys maybe are going to be in that second round. I think Braylon Allen's going to have a team really like him and like the age to get that second round. I think he's maybe a third. If I had to put my betting money on it, I would probably be throwing money on Benson. He's my RB1, but if it wasn't Benson, I would say Brooks is another guy that would be probably the first guy off the board. I like Braylon Allen. I just don't know if enough teams will have him that high on their list that they feel like they got to go grab him right away as the first running back. I think he's maybe one of the top 5, but I really wouldn't be surprised if even like a Marshawn Lloyd, if somebody really liked Lloyd or somebody really liked Wright and they went and got him. I just think it depends on how high teams are willing to go spend on these guys. A lot of these guys are going to probably fall in that third round. And then I think you're going to see a ton of guys taken in like the 6th, 7th round this year. But that's not a death sentence like it used to be in the past. Usually that meant you're probably not even going to make the roster. These days for running backs, you can make it. You can definitely, and you can be successful as a 5th, 6th, 7th round pick. So I think you're going to see a lot of those guys there. But if I got a hand to the fire, I'm probably saying Benson, but that's also just because he's my RB1.
One of the biggest problems with Braylon Allen is his pass blocking. That's kind of his biggest knock. And that's okay. I mean, it's, you can teach pass blocking. You can't teach running between tackles. You can't teach, you can't teach catching the ball, I guess. But you can't. Some of these things are unteachable. That some of these you can't teach size. You can't teach speed. That's one thing you can't teach. But you can teach pass blocking. That's Braylon Allen's biggest flaw. Then it is what it is. Colin, who do you think NFL team? You could be any. You could put a hat on any Chargers, Chiefs, whatever. So be it. Which team is drafting which running back first?
Yeah, I wish I did a little bit more research as to who has those 2nd and 3rd round picks, because we're not going to see any of these guys go in the 1st round. I think that's a given. 2nd round is really tough to say that any of these guys have done enough to warrant a 2nd round pick. But if you're a team that has maybe 2 2nd round picks, you might feel a little bit better about using that second round pick on a running back. I would say if I was drafting today, it would be Trey Benson. I do think he's the most complete back. He'll be 22 during the summer. I do think he is a guy that can come in and play a 3-down role. Depending on your needs, if you have maybe a Devon Achane, guy that's really speedy but isn't going to handle 200-plus carries, maybe a Braylon Allen fits the Miami Dolphins. But I did just quickly glance. They have a 1st-round pick, a 2nd-round pick, and then don't pick again till the 5th round. So a team like Miami that really does need running back help might not get it in the draft. I think the elephant in the room, which we haven't really brought up today, is that free agency starts next week. And we're going to get a ton of answers about this running back class and where they could end up from free agency. We learned today that Saquon Barkley is not going to get the franchise tag from New York, but perhaps wants to stay there. Josh Jacobs, Derrick Henry, a lot of these talented guys are out there. Alexander Madison, who I know disappointed some people in fantasy last year, is available. The list goes on, and I do think the list is going to grow. I do think you're going to see some cap casualties moving forward. The Baltimore Ravens are a team that, really needs some running back help. They can't continue to let Lamar Jackson run. As far as just the back that I would spend my draft capital on, it would be Trey Benson. Jonathan Brooks, limited touches, ACL tear, might not even be ready week 1, might start the year on the PUP list, the physically unable to perform list. So he's not a guy I think someone's going to use a high draft capital on. So I would say Trey Benson, but I've hypothesized a little bit on where some of these backs can go, and I'm sure we'll get into that in a little bit later.
Doesn't Braylon Allen just feel like he just is going to fall into Tennessee and be the heir apparent to the king?
We love making those sort of high ceiling comparisons, and Braylon Allen, seeing him, as a beast in the gym and now running, hopefully he'll run that 4.5 at his pro day. Yeah, I do think, but again, Mike Vrabel's not there. It's a whole new coaching regime. I don't think they're going to be that run heavy team anymore.
And Derrick Henry's a really good pass blocker too. And that's one thing that Allen is not good at. So we'll see that. What is the surprise landing spot of these? Let's just say we talked about Trey Benson, who gets. Well, let's just say like where do you think who gets drafted first? Like Trey Benson was what you guys said. I think it's going to be Braylon Allen. Where does like Blake Corum or guys who are like, I think people want to see him in the Chargers, things like that. Where do you think some of these other guys are going to land? Just what teams need running backs? Like free agency, we talked about is going to happen next week. But some of these guys, you can see by NFL contracts, they're only going to have a year left or 2 years left, maybe. The NFL's got a lot more money to play with now. There's running backs not a necessity for any team. But where would be some good fits for some of these other guys?
I actually tweeted this out during the combine. The Green Bay Packers have 2 second-round picks and 2 third-round picks. A.J. Dillon is going to hit the free agency market, and Aaron Jones needs to take a pay cut to stick around. They have a very young wide receiver core. Christian Watson, Jaden Reed, Dontavian Wicks, Romeo Dobbs. So they don't really need any help in that regard. Maybe they bring in a cheap veteran for the receiving core, but in order for that offense to go, I think they need another running back behind Jordan Love there. I don't think Aaron Jones, who I think is turning 29 or 30, is a guy that you can expect to handle 230 carries anymore. And A.J. Dillon just wasn't really it. He's not a guy that I would pay. So I think the Green Bay Packers are a team, 2 seconds, 2/3 are going to spend one of them on a running back here. Braylon Allen did play his college ball in Wisconsin. Perhaps he's a fit there. You mentioned Derrick Henry as a comp. Maybe he's more of an A.J. Dillon for that Green Bay Packers team. So you could see an Allen-Aaron Jones combo in that backfield.
Yeah.
Blake Corum, I think, to the Chargers is something that a lot of people have come up with. I tweeted this out as well during the combine. The size worries me. He came in at 5'7" and 205 pounds. Love the 205 pounds, but 5'7". Devon Achane measured in at 5'8". A lot of people told him he was too small. Darren Sproles measured in at 5'6", of years past. So Blake Corum comes in right there. You look at his arms. He is a beefy, small running back, but expecting him to be this guy that's going to see 250 carries. Now, he had a ton of work at Michigan. Obviously, Harbaugh probably has his sights set on him in some regards. The Chargers are a little bit cap-strapped, so I do think they're going to add running backs in this draft. But I don't know if Blake Corum is really the guy to be a lead back, more of a complementary back, especially early on. But I do think the Green Bay Packers are a team to look at. I think Braylon Allen and Marshawn Lloyd, maybe even Audric Estime fit the mold there, especially if Aaron Jones comes back.
Yeah, because some of the spots I like landing spots on top of what Colin said. I think the Bucs are going to go out and get someone. I know people who have Rashad White are going to be upset, but I think the Bucs draft somebody. Kills all my Sean Tucker talk, but I really like to see him get a shot. But outside of the Bucs, I think I can see the Cowboys going RB in the second round. That's where I think Jonathan Brooks or possibly Trey Benson could fall. I think that's a spot. Now, if the Ravens don't sign someone and they draft a guy, whoever the Ravens draft is going to shoot up fantasy mock draft boards. I mean, because everybody wants the running backs on the Ravens. So I think that's a spot people are looking at. I think, like Colin said, I think the Packers are a spot. Another team I could see making a move because they really do want to run the football, even though their quarterback is amazing, is the Houston Texans. They obviously weren't in love with Dameon Pierce. He got banged up again, sat. Devin Singletary had a nice little run there for people that had him in fantasy at the end of the year, but I still think they look to upgrade that position as he's getting a little bit older. So those are some teams I definitely think I'd take a look at. I think a sneaky team, I don't think they'll take anybody early, but I think a team that I could see like a Ray Davis going to would possibly be like the Colts. If they don't, Moss is a free agent. They don't really have a set player behind Jonathan Taylor right now. Evan Hull was their pick last year late in the draft, a guy I still like out of Northwestern, but he ended up injuring his knee and missing most of the season. So I could see them going in and grabbing another late round running back to kind of compete there. And then I think Colin mentioned earlier in the show, what do the Browns do with Nick Chubb? Kareem Hunt already on the move. I think, they've got Ford. Are they happy with all that? Or do they go get a running back? And I think for a lot of these teams, it's just going to be, does the guy they want fall to where they're comfortable taking him? And if he doesn't, maybe they just sit around and hang back and say, okay, if I don't get the guy I wanted in the third, he doesn't get to me, maybe I wait till the sixth to take somebody. I'm not going to way jump up and go ahead to get someone, as we've kind of seen that with running backs. They are the position that falls the fastest, but they also still can go late and still be useful for fantasy purposes. But those are some of the spots that I think some of these guys could end up landing in and really be good spots for fantasy.
Yeah, I think Cleveland does the dog and pony show with Nick Chubb this year. Kind of starts him off on the pup, maybe. Yeah, you come back. Here's your last season. The Browns love you, that kind of deal. But I could see them moving. Definitely drafting a running back here to go wrong with Jerome Ford, who I don't think is their long-term answer. He's here for a good time, but not a long time, as they say. So
one more thing I want to mention on those guys with the Browns. They have a great offensive line, first of all, but they went into the season. They traded for Pierre Strong in August, so they had Nick Chubb, Pierre Strong, and Jerome Ford. Kareem Hunt wasn't there yet, if you remember. Nick Chubb tears his ACL and a couple other ligaments in week 2, and then they go out and get Kareem Hunt, who goes on to lead the other backs in carries. Jerome Ford wasn't even the lead back in carries from that point on. So that just goes to tell you what they think of guys like Jerome Ford and Pierre Strong being the lead guys. So if Kareem Hunt does leave, I don't think they have utmost faith in Jerome Ford being this 250 carry guy. I do think they could add some talent in free agency or the draft here. Staying in that division, a sneaky team, if I could add one more, is the Cincinnati Bengals, a team that needs to get cheaper, let alone younger in the backfield. Obviously, they're bringing back T. Higgins. We'll see if they trade him. He's going to get tagged, or he has been tagged already. Jamar Chase is going to get paid. Joe Burrow's already gotten paid. Joe Burrow has that wrist injury, which he said he's going to be ready by May. Do they want him throwing as much as he's been throwing? I don't know. I do think they want to lean on the run a little bit more. Joe Mixon is due a roster bonus, a $3 million roster bonus on March 18th. Free agency starts March 11th. So we could see Joe Mixon get cut, which would save them some money. He has 1,986 career touches, including the playoffs. So they could get a lot cheaper at the running back position. Chase Brown is already there. He had a season in college where he had over 300 carries, but I don't think he's really a guy that's built to do that. Only 44 carries as a rookie. So I could see someone ending up in Cincinnati. And while that may not seem like a hot spot because they have such great wide receivers, Joe Mixon has had a very good fantasy career there. So if someone replaces him, that's a name I want to watch too.
What's your favorite? What do you think is a surprise landing spot somewhere? Like, whoa, holy cow, this guy jumped up, and Isaiah Davis or Frank Gore or something like that. Someone who was your surprise draft? On draft day, like, whoa, I didn't see that coming. Which one of these running backs gets drafted higher than what people are thinking right now? JT?
Oh, that's a good question. Oh, man, who goes higher? I just think it's going to depend on what people like as far as skill set for some guys. Like Frank Gore's a guy I want to keep an eye on. Frank Gore Jr. I really like him. Him and Ray Davis are probably my two favorite late round guys. Now, if one of those guys go like say in the 4th round as opposed to like the 6th, I could see them moving up in fantasy mocks to where you're taking those guys in the middle of the 2nd end of the 3rd round, because a 4th round is not bad draft capital for a running back these days, especially when the very top guys aren't going to the 2nd. If one of these guys hits a really good landing spot plus early draft capital, that's where I think you're going to see some guys sneak up into the end of the 1st round of mocks, where you'll see, hey, maybe an RB1. Right now, everybody's kind of going the 2nd round, but maybe you get that RB1 at like 110, 111, 112 of your dynasty drafts. Man, I think Frank Gore is intriguing. Lloyd is the guy I think for people in the Twitter circle, I think they like him more than other people maybe notice, but I think Lloyd is a guy that's going to be sneaky. If you say a Lloyd goes to like a Ravens somewhere in like the 3rd or 4th round, I think you see him shoot up draft boards. I think all of a sudden he may be people's RB1 just because they love the landing spot.
He's been like he's been said like possibly the best PPR draft in this PPR running back in this draft class. So it's been mentioned that before. I can see him going somewhere and somebody falling in love with him. So I get it. How about you, Colin?
Yeah, I actually think a team to watch, and while JT was talking here, as I agree with Marshawn Lloyd, a team I want to watch here is the Las Vegas Raiders. They are kind of dirt broke at this point. I don't know who their quarterback's going to be. I don't know if Josh Jacobs is going to want to re-sign there given the state of the team, although I do love Antonio Pierce getting that head coaching job. If Josh Jacobs does return there for somewhat significant money, that's a huge testament to Antonio Pierce, but Josh Jacobs is probably going to have a lot of suitors in free agency. I could see him walking, at which point the Raiders aren't really a team that is going to spend a ton of money, in my opinion, on another free agency running back. So I could see them using a pick. I'm looking at their draft picks. They've got pick 13, pick 44, and then in round 3, they have pick 77. I could see them using that pick on a guy like Marshawn Lloyd, and him being a lead back there. So if he gets day 2 draft capital, round 3, and Marshawn Lloyd ends up there, giddy up. I think he could be a really, really day 1 fantasy-friendly running back. Even though the Raiders might not be a good team, he's going to see a ton of carries on that team early and often. Another team that I want to look at is the Buffalo Bills. They did make a offensive coordinator change mid-year, and that made James Cook absolutely explode. We'll see what they're doing with their offense if they revamp it in any way, but I do think they're going to add another running back into the mix. I don't think they can really continue to give guys like Latavius Murray significant carries, nor can they let Josh Allen continue to run as much as he has. Although, you could tell him not to run, he still might do it anyway. But
yes, they can.
Yeah, exactly. He is a consensus QB1 in fantasy football for that reason. But I could see them adding a bigger body to that backfield, a change of pace guy for when James Cook needs a breather or, maybe inevitably fumbles the ball again. So, I do think the Buffalo Bills are an interesting place to look at. But I do think a lot of these guys are going to go day 3, and it's maybe not going to be that appealing. I really only think we're going to see 3 or 4 guys go in round 2 and 3, if 2 at all.
Right.
So I don't think there's going to be a ton of oohs and ahs. I think day 3, I often do like yard work, and I have, the draft going on in my headphones on day 3, and I hear a name and I go, oh, cool. Okay. That guy's there. I look at it later. But those running backs, I think, are going to be really important to see where they do end up. But again, we got to see how free agency goes, because guys like Josh Jacobs could return. Tony Pollard could return to Dallas. But if he doesn't, who are they going to add? Stuff like that. So stay tuned. I'm sure there's going to be a ton of buzz, going on in free agency, and we'll go from there.
Free agency is the most important factor for running backs, especially with this position. It's more important than any other position as far as I'm concerned, right? This year, especially. So one more time, Colin, where can everybody find you at?
Yeah, I'll be on Fantrax all year long, especially in the off season here. I'm doing Fantrax Football Fridays on our social media platforms, whether it's myself or I'm bringing on guests. I got to have you guys on. On Fridays, we're just having relevant discussions, breaking news, analysis, giving you the edge that you need for the 2024 fantasy football season, as well as Dynasty. I have written content all year long there too. Obviously, that'll pick up sometime in May, giving you team previews. I do the waiver wire column during the year and stuff. So check me out on Fantrax.
Yeah, it's Nick's doing a great job over there with all the social media, with the site, everything. P2W Fantasy, follow him, follow Fantrax. JT, real fast, where can everybody find you again?
Yeah, just find me on JT Orange on the Twitter, on X. I post all my stuff on there for all my different shows that I'm on, all the different places I write. So go ahead and check me out there.
John McGlynn 75 on X. Thanks for joining us for the running back portion of the Combine recap. And thank you very much, everybody, for joining in. And we will see you later. Have a good day.